Stetson University.
My name is Paul Croce. I teach at Stetson University here in American Studies, History, and Environmental Studies, and welcome tonight to what promises to be an exciting opportunity to learn about the green economy, to learn about a particular local example of companies, plural, that are working on trying to find a more environmentally friendly way to achieve what civilization tries to achieve, but less messy, in a less messy way. So we have not only a Stetson alum in Matthias Haugner, but we have the other members of his business family, Ilyanka and Richard Haugner, who are with Echo House Design. And we also have members of another company, the Professional Energy Services, the foreign family, and Ed is with the company, and Joyce also works with the company, and I understand that Karina and Clarissa are considering it. I'm not sure the direction yet on that. And I'd also like to say a few words about Matthias and working with Matthias. He graduated just a few years ago. And I could say things about Matthias as a good student. I could say things about Matthias as a very involved citizen. He worked in community engagement. He worked in lots of organizations. I could say things about the way he bridged different forms of learning on Stetson's campus. That he was a business major, a finance major, I believe. Is that right? Was it finance?
Business, general business, yes.
General business, and he was a minor in American studies. So he was combining those worlds of practical application and trying to understand the culture and bringing those together. And I dare say he's bringing those together still in the business. But I think the most remarkable thing about Matthias is that he's a person who took his own education so seriously. He's always interested in asking why and figuring things out. And it put him in good stead as a student here with a good head and a good heart. And he's one who had real good aim. We were talking earlier about education is a way of giving aim in life, where you're going. And he's a man who chooses his own directions and figures out how to find aim in life. And I dare say he'll continue to do that in the green economy, in this business, and maybe beyond. So Matthias, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Crochet, for the introduction. That was very flattering. I'm Matthias. I'm a Stetson alumnus of the class of 2007, and at present I do marketing and web development work for Team Gemini, which is the company that's giving this presentation this evening. We are very grateful to be here, and we would like to thank Dr. Crochet and Stetson for taking the initiative to host this event. And we also appreciate this turnout of the audience that we have, which shows us that there are people who are really interested in learning about renewable energy. So speaking of tonight's topic, we will talk about the future of renewable energy now. And what we mean by that is that in the future, renewable energy will play a much more prominent role in people's lives. And tonight we will showcase samples from around the country and the world where that is already the case, so you have an appreciation for what that might be like. But a quick show of hands, how many people here are very involved in renewable energy? You try to get the latest industry news, you're familiar with the different technology types. Show of hands, okay. A couple of you. How about the people on the other side of the spectrum? You don't know too much about renewable energy, you may have heard of solar energy before, but you don't really follow industry news as much. And, okay. And the rest of you may be in between. All right, well, that's our goal this evening is to make this presentation worth your while, and that by the end of the presentation you will have learned something new about renewable energy, but also become more excited about the subject. So let's get the show started. I'm going to dim the lights a little bit so you can see the presentation better. Okay, is that good for everyone?
Yep. Yes.
All right, very good. So the presentation this evening will be divided into 3 sections. We have an introduction in which we talk about different renewable energy types and how they apply to Florida and the United States. We will follow that up by talking about a project that's currently in development here in the land and that our company has been working on. And we will conclude by looking at the global marketplace for renewable energy and prospects for the future. Now, after each section, we will have a short break, and it will also give you the opportunity to ask any questions you have, and we will do our best to answer them. Unfortunately, our time is limited this evening, so there are plenty of important topics related to renewable energy that we will not get to cover. Some honorable mention goes to these particular topics: energy efficiency, energy storage, water conservation, and residential energy use. Those can be presentations in and of themselves, and maybe that will be for another day. Also, we will be discussing a lot of megawatts and gigawatts, a lot of numbers, which by themselves may mean very little. So to put it into context, here are some conversions for the numbers we will be speaking of. But the most important part to really keep in mind is that 1 megawatt can power between 200 and 300 typical American homes. So that will give you some idea of, when we speak of how much renewable energy we're working with, what that means in the scheme of things. Now, last but not least, before we get into the presentation proper, we would like to present the bottom line, or the overarching takeaway for this presentation, which is that renewable energy will only succeed if it makes economic sense and uses a combination of technologies. This theme will recur throughout the presentation, and you will see as we get going why that is the case. So to start with, let's talk about different types of renewable energy. This particular slide has a lot of information to take in, so I will only touch on the highlights and leave the rest open for questions if you have any. Solar energy is one of the most commonly associated types of energy with renewables. There are two ways in which solar energy works. One is solar photovoltaic, or PV, which uses the sun's radiation to produce direct current electricity. And the other type of solar energy is called solar thermal, which uses the sun's heat and is most often used to heat air or water, and can also in some cases be used for power generation. With solar energy, the technology produces few negative environmental impacts. One of the concerns or environmental predicaments that solar energy may pose is in production practices that may be negligent, in which can expose dangerous chemicals to the environment. But otherwise, there are few negative impacts of solar energy. Another drawback, though, for solar energy at the moment is that it's relatively expensive still, and that it is ineffective at night. Also, we have a map here to your right highlighting the solar resource map for the United States. Just as a point of reference, Germany, for instance, has the largest installation of solar PV panels in the world, and it has the solar resource equivalent of Alaska. So if Germany, with so few resources, can accomplish so much with solar energy, imagine what the United States can do if it really gets behind solar energy. Next, we have wind energy. The way it works is that as the blade turns, the central shaft spins a generator to make electricity, and wind turbines placed at sites with strong, steady winds can economically generate electricity without pollutants. There are a few negative environmental impacts, and those can include wildlife deaths. Though several studies have been released that say the occurrence of those accidents are fewer than most people fear. So wind turbines have low ongoing cost and moderate capital costs, and they have a long economic life, normally lasting 20 years or more. Again, here's a resource map for wind energy. The darker areas are places in the United States where wind energy is very strong, versus the light areas where it's fairly poor. So erecting wind farms there may not be the most prudent choice economically. We have hydro energy, which is the most common renewable source of energy in the United States and incidentally the world as well. It functions similarly to wind energy in that water flows through a turbine, spinning it, which then turns a generator to produce electricity. Some environmental concerns are concerned about habitat invasion, but generally hydropower causes very few pollution problems, and they have a long economic life, with some hydro plants being as old as 100 years. And as you can see here, there's an abundance of hydropower available in the United States and already being applied. So of the types of renewable energy we will discuss today, biomass is one of the more complicated ones. Biomass by itself are substances that are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen based. Some samples of those include plants and plant-derived materials such as food crops, grassy and woody plants. It can also include forestry or agriculture products, and the organic component of municipal and industrial waste. Now, depending on how you convert or process that biomass, you can obtain different uses out of it. One derivative of biomass is biofuels. Examples include biodiesel or ethanol, and other uses also include turning certain types of biomass into biogas, which is methane, and it can be used to provide heat or electricity, or in some cases even upgraded to be a natural gas equivalent. Biomass is the second most important renewable energy source in the United States, and it is very important part of waste management infrastructure. And the resources for biomass are fairly abundant throughout the United States. And finally, we have geothermal energy, which uses natural source of heat inside the earth to produce heat or electricity. Geothermal power generation produces few emissions, and the power source is continuously available. However, it is a fairly expensive technology, which means that it's not applied as extensively yet as it could, and the technology still has some way to go before it becomes practical economically. Now, taking all of those together, we have great news, which is that the United States is a very resource-rich nation. And we aren't just talking about fossil fuels here, we're talking about renewable resources, as you can see here. Different regions will use some technologies or will have more benefit using some technologies compared to others. Let us talk about Florida, for instance, which can have particularly good use out of solar energy, biomass, and some geothermal. But for instance, not so much wind or hydropower. And as you can see, if you want to take a look at the rest of the map, there's a lot of variation there, but the United States has a lot of resources to tap into. So you might ask yourself, okay, how do the different states use those resources then, and are they using them effectively? One way of trying to examine that question is to look at what's called a Renewable Portfolio Standard, which mandates that electricity providers need to source a certain percentage of their energy portfolio from renewables. A lot of states have adopted these portfolio standards. Some have adopted goals, but a lot of them haven't, including the southeastern United States and Florida. Different states have different goals that they have set, so it's really diverse in terms of how much renewable energy is being employed. And the result and progress we've seen based off that can be seen on this map. The northwestern United States and northeastern United States, as well as California, are doing very well in terms of covering the energy production with renewables. Here are the top 5 states, which impressively each generates more than 50% through renewable energy. Florida and much of the southeastern United States, unfortunately, is doing fairly poorly, with just having about 5% or less of its energy produced by renewables. Some standout examples, if we want to look at some superlatives, include these. Washington State, for instance, has the largest power plant in the United States, which is a dam, and that generates 6,800 megawatts, which is enough to power millions of homes. Although it's not only used for that, it can also be used for other purposes where electricity or power may be needed. Some other ones include California, which has the largest solar facility in the world, Texas, which has the largest wind farm in the world, and just to for a bright spot for Florida, we do have the largest solar PV farm in the United States. So it's not all gloomy for Florida, but there's a lot of progress that we still can make. Looking at the country at large then, this chart uses data from 2010, but as of that time, the United States uses about 8% renewable energy, which is almost as much as nuclear power, which I found surprising. I thought nuclear power had a larger percentage. But just in 2009, the United States was the world's leader in geothermal, solar, and wind power, and trailed only China in the total capacity it was putting out. And more recent data indicates that as of the first half of this year, the United States is already covering 14% of its domestically produced electricity through renewables. So you may think, well, this is excellent, we're making good progress, and that is true, but there's really a case to be made that we could and should be doing more to stimulate renewable energy. Now you might be asking why, because renewable energy is still fairly expensive, and a question in response would be that one of the reasons is their high cost to doing nothing. So let us look at an example of how that works.
Most people agree.
All right. This video focused on Florida, so let us continue on that path. As you saw from the chart earlier, Florida generates about 5% of its energy from renewables. And taking a look at the progress since 2005, it hasn't really seen too much change since then. Most of Florida's renewable energy comes from some hydro conventional power, but most comes from wood waste, landfill gas, and other biomass. Interestingly, solar energy is supplied very scarcely, so there's a lot of room for progress there. And it is important that we do make progress because there are a lot of economic impacts that can be derived from the clean energy economy. To look at the big picture of that particular economy, it can be broken down into these 4 categories, which include building sustainable energy for the future, reducing and managing our energy demand, improving our products and processes, and recycling and remediating waste. And then you have training and support, which affects all of these together. To be more specific, here's a short list of job samples related to renewable energy. Now the font may be a little small, but most of the jobs listed there include installers, construction workers, technicians, engineers. But that is just a small sample of what's really possible. It's a very broad involvement that can be gained from renewable energy, including white-collar jobs like business, development, legal and financial services, educators, marketing, and more. Looking at the overall job growth of the clean energy economy in the United States, by 2007, over 63,000 businesses generated more than 770,000 jobs in the United States, with an average growth of about 1.9% per year. And between 2006 and 2008, there have been about $12.6 billion of venture capital investments made into clean technology in just 40 states plus the District of Columbia. So let's take a look then at one of the states that is doing very well, which is Oregon.
Solar, wind, and geothermal. Oregon.
All right, so that was a brief look at Oregon. It's time for a short break now, and if you have any questions on the section so far. Yes?
What is the reason why solar energy, why are the startup costs so expensive? Like, what material does it take that makes it that way?
It's rare earth materials as far as I recall, and it's just the process of putting them together. The manufacturing component and the materials themselves, I believe, just make them expensive, as far as I recall. But with product manufacture and as more businesses get into the industry, those costs are bound to go down.
Okay.
Yes?
The part in wind energy, the reason all that in the Midwest is good for wind is, Tornado Alley. Are like the wind, what are they called again?
Turbines?
Yeah, turbines. Will they be able to withstand a tornado?
That's a very good question. I'm not.
They are.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay, but
You got to imagine the largest wing of a wind mill is 60 feet, one piece today. So they became, during the last 2 or 3 decades, 3 times larger than in the beginning manufactured. So their strength on wind load, even earthquake, up to grade 4, will hold a windmill. Yeah.
all right.
They're huge.
Yes.
I'm curious to know whether or not there's any effort to renew the subsidies that are being given for solar voltaics. We got benefit from that, but the program I think has been cut or at least been reduced drastically. Is there any effort? Is there any idea of when that's going to be reestablished?
No, it will not be reestablished. Unfortunately, not. One of the main incentives was cash grant 1603 from federal side. It will end in the end of this year, December 31st, and the whole industry is very sad about this because, like you saw right now, it's only a combination between all of the elements economical and 30% less in an investor's hand makes it very, very hard.
We got the benefit of it while it existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Helped us.
Yeah.
There will come a tax incentive starting in 2012, but that is way
Not
more,
enough.
way less benefit like an investor has right now. Way less.
As we saw from an earlier map, a lot of states still have renewable portfolio standards, and they have goals that are down the line many years from now. So individual state governments will still create legislation that will boost the renewable energy economy.
And this is what Germany did make so very well in that kind of renewable energy because of our feed-in tariffs. And right now in the United States we have only 2 areas where we have a feed-in tariff. This is in Washington and here in Gainesville with 22 cents per kilowatt hour. But the government has to take a better approach for renewable energy, because if you have an investment of $1 million in the oil industry, you create 4 jobs, 4 permanent jobs, compared to in renewable energy 14 jobs per 1 million investment. It's a political thing too, you know. You have one time that the free market goes away, and the other decision is give incentives. And right in our industry, it's really not good, because this is the future producing of energy and the future creation of jobs. But since we have grid parity, we think very soon it will make it a lot of easier.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
What did you say when you said there's only two what?
2 areas in the United States who have a feed-in tariff. That means you close PPAs, power purchase agreements with energy providers. And you have a contract in the whole United States, and you got paid to avoided cost. That means if you feed the grid with your solar energy or with biogas, you get the amount of cents what you would have paid if you pay for oil. But a feed-in tariff gives its incentives to have a permanent amount of cents. That means 22 cents, 26 cents, and compared to a PPA to avoided cost, right now every person in the United States gets only 7 to 8% in their PPAs. Like Germany took over and said, okay, the customer has not to pay it, we make up for the difference. That they invest in solar farms, in jobs and everything. The government pays for the difference between what the cost of producing the energy is and what the customer is paying. And we have only 2 samples in the United States, Gainesville and Washington. You understood my language?
Somewhat.
Okay. That makes it work, but it's here, unfortunately not here.
All right. Then, yes, Dr. Boucher, sorry.
Are many large companies getting involved with renewable energy? For example, BP advertises itself as Beyond Petroleum. Shell talks about being involved with non-fossil fuels. Is it companies like this that are doing it, or is it large companies, or is it both? Is it a mixture?
For the majority are probably medium-sized companies, but there are also large companies that get involved with it. For instance, General Electric, if I recall, is involved in some biogas production, but also windmill production, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're producing the largest manufacturing plant for windmills somewhere in the northeastern United States. So it's also larger companies like General Electric that get involved with it.
Across the board, there's some small, medium, and large companies.
Yes.
It's really across the board.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, everybody had a bit of a stretch break. I'll dim the lights again, and let's continue. Okay, now we'll take a look at a project that's currently in development here in the land, and that our group and partners have been working on very diligently. It's called Project Gemini, which is also where our combined group derives its name. Just for background on our company, we work with most renewable technologies for residential, commercial, and other clients. And one of our strengths is that we combine American and European partnerships, including product manufacturers and subcontractors. We look to provide turnkey projects, which means we are involved with design, development, integration, and implementation, as well as the management of projects. So we have turnkey solutions for potential investors or people interested in these sorts of projects. And finally, we also look at the long-term model because we recognize the importance of education, product innovation, and looking at the economy beyond the project itself. So the surrounding community, how do projects impact their communities? There are 4 major project components of this project that we're working on. It will include a solar PV farm, a solar PV greenhouse, a biogas plant, and a business and research center. And one of the questions you might ask is, why not just build a solar farm and call it a day? That is a good question. There are a couple of reasons for it, but a short and foremost answer is that because of the relatively expensive solar technology and the low wholesale price of electricity, it will take a longer time for the investor to get the return on investment. Now there are possible solutions to help decrease that problem, but the solution that we are looking at is to add more strength to the economic model, which will be viewed here. In most projects, or for instance, if in a solar farm only project, you sell electricity and the investor gets revenue just from that, but it's during the daytime. Adding the components we just spoke of, you not only add more electricity for the investor, but you also add additional revenue models, such as the plants and crops that will be grown in the greenhouse, or leasing out the space. You also have the methane gas that is produced by the biogas plant, which also can be sold. And you have the high nutrition compost that is a byproduct of that process, which can also be distributed and sold. So you're adding revenue for the investor, so that means it will take less time for them to get their return on investment, therefore making the project more attractive to potential investors. Taking a more detailed look then at the different components, the solar farm has a capacity of about 12 megawatts, which can power up to 3,600 homes in the local community. And you also see the carbon footprint in pounds per year that it will reduce per year. And the point of the solar farm is to generate electricity to be fed back into the grid. So it's a renewable source of electricity. Then you have the solar PV greenhouse, which is essentially a greenhouse with a roof-mounted solar farm, which have a capacity of 1.3 megawatts. That will help to power operations for the greenhouse, and any excess electricity that it generates can also be fed into the grid. So it's a way to make the production of crops energy efficient. We also have a biogas plant, which turns biowaste into methane gas for energy storage and extra power. So if you have peak demands for energy, the biogas plant would activate, and you're able to provide more electricity. But you can also this way provide electricity during nighttime when the sun isn't shining and solar is ineffective. It will take about 30,000 tons of biowaste and convert it into energy. Most of that biowaste will come from the greenhouse, but a lot of it will also come from the surrounding community. And that's where you also see part of the community impact. It's local businesses that will contribute to waste, which will then be turned into energy. And finally, you have the Business and Research Center, which is the operating hub for this particular renewable energy cluster, but also opens opportunities for additional collaborations with research institutions, internships, and so forth. Also, to add another point for the solar PV greenhouse, agriculture is a very important part of the Florida economy. And in 2010, for instance, there was a 10-day period where there was a freeze, and Florida agriculture lost $273 million and required national disaster funds from FEMA in order to recuperate from the situation. This particular greenhouse design will help mitigate those disasters and help reduce the costs if you were to proliferate them. So there's a lot of incentive for Florida growers to adopt these style of greenhouses, and it may also be a way for the future in terms of producing food. You do it energy efficiently while you produce the food, and you can also supply electricity back to the city. So you do 2 things at once. In terms of how the cluster will impact the community, one component will be carbon emission reductions, which will be over 51 million pounds per year. That's the equivalent of CO2 emissions from almost 200,000 barrels of oil consumed, or annual greenhouse gas emissions from over 16,000 passenger vehicles. You have an increased income, similar to the example you saw with Oregon and how much they're benefiting from the renewable energy in their communities, which will support public services. You also have local business integration. Restaurants, for instance, that would buy the crop that is grown into greenhouse or other such ways. And you have tourism opportunities as another example. They might tour the facility and also create state and nationwide marketing, thus attracting more visitors for the community. We also have job creation. The projected creation for this project is 200 plus jobs, which will include temporary, permanent, and indirect jobs. And there's also manufacturing potential. The companies we have spoken with, if this cluster becomes really successful and there will be more demand for technologies like it, we may have a manufacturing facility here in Volusia County. So there's potential for that, and we're really working towards that. And finally, of course, educational opportunities, because that's an integral part to the proliferation and the growth of these sorts of technologies, and to make projects like this happen elsewhere also. Okay, another short break. This section went by a little more quickly, but in case there are any questions. Yes.
What is the investment? There are a lot of family-owned operations for greenhouse operations, especially in this rural area. And the upfront investment to switch to this, what would be their recovery period? Because especially in this economy, that funding and the banks even funding a lot of it. Where would their
the return of invest of a greenhouse this size would be between 7 and 9 years, because you have multiple revenue streams.
And so how about the, for a small operation, what would the initial investment be?
Depends on the size. This is very sophisticated with automatic planting and seeding, climate control. You can level this out in the size. What you're growing vegetables or plants is a chef thing, like you cook your soup. It's a really sophisticated operation, which route you want to go. Growing vegetable, growing crops only, or growing a mix of vegetables, or growing oriental flowers, or high-value products. That's up to the grower. Yeah. So that's the way you demand your annual revenue and your return of investment.
Yes, in the back.
When will this be completed, or is it completed?
We hope we can break ground this year. This is actually, I don't know if anybody knows, this is a real project on International Speedway Drive across the airport, where we have the power station. We hope we can break ground this year, and it will take 1 year building, and hopefully after 1 year everything is ready.
It takes 1 year to build.
And the revenue, part of the revenue comes from selling the power generated, right?
Yeah.
Not only.
No, not
Part
always,
of the- yeah.
and we were just talking about feed-in tariffs a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. So what sort of arrangement is there?
If the arrangement is a PPA to avoided cost, that means we have to go with the same ways than other companies are going, but we have the other revenues and selling the food and vegetables, and selling the food and selling methane, and are able, because of that cluster about first solution of energy storage, we can feed the grid to in peak times. That brings us 2 or 3 cents more per kilowatt hour, because we storage the methane gas, and like the slice from Progress Energy is like from 3 to 9 cents. Whenever we can deliver to 9 cents, we will take our storage energy and feed it in the grid. But we have a really good revenue about from the greenhouse and from the biogas plant, from the soil, from the nutrition soil we can sell.
All right, there was a question here.
Okay. How about safety? Because I know methane gas is actually worse for the environment than CO2. So as far as I can hear, it's methane gas. So how are we going to go about safety?
Methane gas is actually the cleanest gas. You cannot even smell this. You're talking probably about biogas. Biogas is the first product out of the fermentation, which has to be cleaned with a carbon unit, and that is cleaned with water, and CO2 and becomes then methane gas. You cannot smell methane gas at all. It's the cleanest product. And when you burn this, it becomes water again. You can drink it. That cleans it.
Isn't methane gas when it gets into the ozone layer
No,
worse?
not at all.
I can clarify this, Director of Environmental Science. So methane gas is an awful greenhouse gas, but when you burn it, it becomes water and carbon dioxide, which is not as bad a greenhouse gas. It's still carbon dioxide, but you capture the energy and you reduce the greenhouse effects. The ozone is a chlorofluorocarbon gas issue, and that's elsewhere. But if the methane from the biogas plant was to be simply released into the environment, that would be no different than taking the waste and throwing it in the landfill. So you're actually reducing the greenhouse potential for the operation.
Right.
My question is, I want to see if I understand the economic model here. So you have business offices, you rent some space, money comes in. You have biogas, so waste from the greenhouse goes in, gets turned into biogas, you make energy, use that to run the facilities. And if there's any extra, you can push that into the grid.
Yeah.
And then you have the compost that comes out of the biogas, which you can sell or use in the greenhouse.
It's a grade A compost, very high nutrition.
And then you have the greenhouse. This is where does the greenhouse get rented out to farmers, or are you going to do your own?
We have three sections. One we like to dedicate for research, plant research, biochemistry. Yeah, we like to talk with the Max Planck Institute together with Stetson University to get a relationship established. But they want to see that greenhouse first, of course, before we can start a program like this. And the other two sections are going to grow it, or retailers, if they are interested. We talk to many those sources like Whole Food Market, Publix, and those are multiple retailers for vegetable growing, organic growing.
And so they rent that space as well, essentially like the same as office space, but for farming.
We have an offer
We have
today.
off-take contracts with discount market in Germany. They have 51 discount markets in Germany, so we are already in contract with them. They will take over everything what we produce, and we are right now in contact with Publix, because Publix likes to purchase in areas here from Florida, and if you are capable to deliver 1,000 stores, because Publix like to have it the same kind of vegetables in the same size from the same grower for all the 1,000 jobs, but makes it a lot of easier for us, because the greenhouse will produce enough. It's 160,000 square foot.
And then the follow-on question, is there any idea to, maybe since you're building from scratch, would it be possible to get like organic practices certified into this thing and perhaps add value to the
And I have to tell you, especially for that greenhouse, we really went for somebody with a lot of experience, because we chose Artiki Antwerp. This is the biggest greenhouse builder in Europe, and they did together with Bielectric. Bielectric did last year over 300 megawatt worldwide, and the first that kind of project was in Latina and Italy 2 years ago, and we are doing now in Russia and Saudi Arabia and all over, and we choose one of the most experienced, and he will lead the construction here and will manage or will be guidance for the first steps of farming. And to give you a sample, like if you have in a regular greenhouse 4 times harvesting, the climate controlled greenhouse gives us the possibility to double the harvesting amount. We can harvest 8 times. It's very, very advanced with every available renewable energy technology. And we hope that Stetson will integrate the research in that.
We have incorporated geothermal, which creates actually a solid temperature to any plant root. So it's an underlayer under the root, on the table, on the root surface. So that is a 2 feet level around the plant, around the crop, where you have an even temperature throughout the year. If we go up north in colder areas like state of New York or so, we always implement a biogas plant next to it, which you can start with a 40 kilowatt up to 2,000 kilowatt. It all depends on the infrastructure and the project size. And this biogas plant will serve the entire heat, for freezing temperature in wintertime.
Okay. All right, so we just have one more short section to go in. If there are more questions afterwards, we will stay around and answer them, but we also want to be respectful of people's time, so let's get this wrapped up and look at the global marketplace. So the United States has the second largest installed capacity the world over in terms of renewables, and one of the key points from this particular map is that hydro, wind, and geothermal are the three most prevalent components in the world over in terms of renewable energy. And there's a lot of growth. Just this particular slide showing a 40% growth between 2007 and 2008. And there's more growth to be expected. This particular chart highlights several sources of renewable energy that are expecting growth. Solar leads them with about 26%. Followed by wind, geothermal, and biopower. Let's also take a look at some global examples. Okay, so those were 5 examples that portrayed some contrasting ways in which renewable energy is used around the world. And a couple of takeaways from those videos is that an important component in getting progress in renewable energy is, one, to find your motivation. Different people have different motivations. We saw in the German video, for instance, that the nuclear disaster of Chernobyl was a strong contributor to people's attitude changing on renewable energy and government following suit. Here in the United States, it's a large country. Different people have different motivations, and that's all right. Some people might be motivated to follow renewable energy because they want independence from foreign oil. For some people, it's to mitigate pollution, while for others, it's just purely economical. So whatever the reason people may have, that's all right. But people should find reasons to get behind renewable energy because there's a lot of growth and economic activity that can be generated from it. Secondly, it is necessary to have public and private partnerships, as we saw, government policy that supports or incentivizes initiatives in the renewable energy. We need educational institutions that educate workers and foster innovation, and you need private companies that help with the mass production and decreasing the cost of technologies. And when those combinations occur at the same time, motivation and public-private partnerships, you will hopefully see growth and innovation, which is what you will need if you want to achieve eventually 100% renewable energy. And that brings us back then to the bottom line, which is that renewable energy will only succeed if it makes economic sense and uses a combination of technologies. All right, and that is the end. Do we have any additional questions? All right, yes. No more questions or comments, feedback? Yes.
But a lot of these initiatives and hopes are in terms of improved production, less production of things that produce waste and side effects, more production of things, solar, et cetera, that don't produce those negative effects. Are there initiatives that you folks are working on or that you know that are working on the demand side, incentives, or other issues that could affect the demands, or is that more something that has to happen governmentally? Are there businesses that are working on the demand side?
That's a good question. There's a website called desireusa.org, which lists statewide incentives for renewables, and those are usually a combination between government incentives and others as well, utility incentives, I believe, and others. So it's very varied across the United States. Each state has their own unique incentives, and they can apply to different renewable energy technologies such as solar, but others as well. And those may apply for residential and other purposes.
Could you repeat that website?
This is desireusa.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no E in there, just the D, desire.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right. Well, we will probably be around for a few more minutes if you want to come up and ask any questions. But thank you all for being here, for taking your time out of your day to be here, and we hope that you've learned something new about renewable energy, but also become more excited about it, and that this evening has been worth your time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Stetson University.